All right, Rabosai, good morning. Begin by thanking our sponsors for this morning's share. To thank our Talmud Torah sponsors for the month of Kislev, Sammy and Malka Esterson for dedicating all of the shiurim and drashos this month in memory of their parents and commemoration of their yahrzeits, Yitzchak Laib ben Aharon HaKohen, Sarah Rachel bas Baruch Avraham, and Hinda bas Henech Efraim. We hope that in the merit of our Talmud Torah, although the neshamas will have an aliyah and the family a nechama. We thank our Week of Learning sponsors, Paul and Kathy Pollack, for dedicating the Week of Learning this week in honor of the birth of a grandson to Rabbi Henoch Morris, Rosh Kollel of Columbus Community Kollel, and his wife Chaya, born to Isaac and Esther Morris of Baltimore. Mazel tov. Our Day of Learning sponsors, Avraham and Shaindy Kelman, in memory of Yeshaya, Yosef ben Yoel, Mr. Alexander David Shaindy Kelman's father. We hope that in the merit of our Talmud Torah, the Neshama will have an aliyah and the family a nechama. Plus, we also dedicate our learning today in the Zechus of Refuah Shalema for Steve Golaskov's father, who had a bit of a significant turn. We should keep him in our tfilos. Nachum Sender ben Ito Rachel, and we hope that he, together with Kol Chol Yisrael, have a complete and enduring refuah. Mostly with that, let us begin. So again, we continue in our journey in Maseches Taanis. Beautiful Gemara ahead of us today. Today's daf is daf Gimel. We left off right on the bottom of Beis Amud Beis. So we'll say, let's actually pick up. It's six lines up from the bottom. Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira Omer. So remember again, we're the brayso that we saw in yesterday's daf introduced us to a whole new group of opinions. So remember again, in the Mishnah, we just thought that we had two opinions regarding the start of Mashiv Haruach Umorid Hageshem, Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Yoshua. Then the Brayse introduced us to a whole new bunch of opinions. So we're going through them now one by one. We are now up to the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. So Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira Omer, B'sheni B'chag Kumaskir. So remember again, Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira said, when do we begin to recite Mashiv Haruach Umorid Hageshem? On the second day of Sukkot. Now, where does that come from? So the Gemara says, my time with Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira. What's the logic of that shita? Why day number 2? This sanya, Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira Omer, B'sheni, ne'emar b'sheni v'niskehem, v'ne'emar b'shishi unisacheha, v'ne'emar b'shvi'i kamishpatam. So I'll say, now watch this drasha, right? So each of these 3 psukim are written by Sukkos. So on day number 2, it says, v'niskehem, right? Their libations. On Shishi, nisacheha, its libation, shvi'i kimishpatam. Again, their laws or their rules. So the Gemara, what's happening over here is as follows. If you take a look at Rashi, now again, all of these references, ultimately again, to the offerings on Sukkot. Now if you look at Rashi, b'sheni v'niskehem, the sagi b'niska. Now on day number 2, it didn't have to say niskem. It could have just said niska. So also listen to this. On each of these days, there's an extra letter at the end of each of these words. If you take the extra letter at the end of each of these words, what do you come out with? Hare mem, yud mem, hare kan mayim. Shabbosai, the extra mem of v'niskehem, the extra, really, yud of unisacheha, and the extra mem of kimishpatam, mem yud mem gives you mayim. So the Gemara says, what do you see from here? Mikan remez lenisuch hamayim min haTorah. Now we'll say, what we are going to see is something very interesting. Now remember, we already learned about nisuch hamayim back in Maseches Sukkah, right? It was the unique water libation on the Yom Tov of Sukkot. It was unique because normally libations nisachim come from what? From wine. So the notion that you have from water. Now where in the Torah does it say that you're supposed to pour water on the Mizbeach? And the answer is, it actually doesn't. Rabbi Yehuda, now we'll see there is a machlokes as to where exactly this halacha emanates from. But Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira is of the opinion that it's actually alluded to in the pasuk, and it's alluded to from the extra letters on day 2, day 6, and day 7. V'niskehem, extra mem, unisacheha, extra yud. It could have just said nisacheha with the hay without the yud, and kimishpatam could have just said kimishpat, extra mem. Mem, yud, mem. That is a remez, that is a scriptural allusion, a hint to the concept of nisuch hamayim. So now watch this. So umay shna b'sheni. So now, what does that have to do with anything? So remember, what's Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira shita? His sheet is when do you begin to say Asher Chomer Geshem? When? Day number 2. Why day number 2? Umayshna b'sheni dinakit dechiramizi lehu bikra b'sheni hu dramizi hilchach b'sheni matgarinan. So Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira will say like this. When does the scriptural allusion to Nisuch Hamayim begin? When? On which day? Day number 2. Day number 2. Therefore, when do we begin to make reference to water? Mashiva or rain, Mashiva roch amar the Geshem. When? On day number 2. So Rabbi said there's 2 things that's happening over here. Number 1, Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira understands that Nisuch Hamayim is alluded to from the extra letters on day 2, day 6, day 7. The extra letters refer to Nisuch Hamayim, so that's the remez. That's how we know that there's a water libation on Sukkot. And since the Torah goes out of its way on day number 2 to begin the allusion to rain, therefore we begin to insert Mashiva Ruach Umorid Geshem on day number 2. That's the sheet of Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira, Rabbi Akiva on B'shishi B'chag Maskir. So Rabbi Akiva holds that we begin to say Mashiva Ruach Umorid Geshem on day number 6. Shene Emar B'shishi Unisacheha. Because we'll say on day number 6, the Torah, when referring to the libations, says Unisacheha. It's libations. And what do you see from here? B'shnei nisuch and akasav medaber. The Torah is talking about 2 libations. Nisacheha is plural. So what do you mean plural? So what are the 2 libations? It must be echad nisuch hamayim ve'esach nisuch hayayin. One is referring ultimately again to the classic wine libation, and one is referring to the additional water libation. But say that they're both referring to wine. Because Rabbi Akiva agrees with Rabbi Yehuda's drasha, that namely again because of the extra letter of Mem Yud Mem on days 2, 6, and 7, the Torah is alluding to an additional water libation. Therefore, on day number 6, when it says Unisacheha, it's libations plural. One is referring to wine, and one is referring to water. Now we'll say, but again, what's the chap of Rabbi Akiva? Why does he say day number 6? Because the word unisacheha, its libations, is mentioned where? Day 6. Day 6. So Gemara says, 1 second, top of Gimel. Isavar lak Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira nema kavase. Well, if that's the case, that he holds like Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira, in other words, that if Rabbi Akiva agrees with the Mayim allusion, then why not hold like Rabbi Yehuda and begin Mashi Baruch Amar Geshem when? On day number 2, just like Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira, to which the Gemara says, Isav like Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira nema kavase, kasav Rabbi Akiva ki ksiv nisuch yisera b'shishi hu dichsiv. No, because at the end of the day, Rabbi Akiva says like this. Listen, at the end of the day, on day 6, the Torah does say unisacheha, which refers to 2 libations. So bless you. So there the Torah is explicitly talking about 2 libations. See, even though Rabbi Akiva will say like this, I agree with Rabbi Yehuda's Mem Yud Mem drasha. Right? I agree with Niskehem, Nisacheha, and Kimishpatam to teach me that Nisuch Hamayim is alluded to in the Psukim. But at the end of the day, Rabbi Akiva says, in Rabbi Akiva's estimation, the Torah actually makes explicit reference to Nisuch Hamayim. How does it make explicit reference to it? On day number 6, by telling us that there are libations. So by using the plural on day number 6 tells me, says Rabbi Akiva, that Nisuch Hamayim occurs on day 6, even though I agree with Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira's drasha that Nisuch Hamayim itself is also alluded to on days 2, 6, and 7. So we'll say this is the sheet of Rabbi Akiva. So now again we've got Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira day number 2, Rabbi Akiva day number 6. So Tanya, another brayso, Rabbi Nosson Omer Bakodesh Haseich Nesech Shechar LaHashem. So we'll say, so the pasuk says again in the Karbanos of Sukkis, V'niskor v'Isahin lakevas achad bakodesh haseich nesech shechar LaHashem. So says the Gemara, b'shnei nisuch and akasav medaber. So what Rabbi Nosson says, the Torah did not need to say haseich nesech. Right? What does haseich nesech literally mean? How do you translate that phrase? Pour libations. Torah could have just said bakodesh nesech. Nesech. Because we'll say, I don't have to say haseich nesech. I don't have to say pour libations. Why don't I have to say pour libations? Because what else are you doing it? What else are you doing with it, right? Obviously you're pouring libations, right? So the phrase itself is redundant. If you take a look at Rashi, actually not yet. So the Gemara says, B'shnei nisuch ha'kasav medaber, echad nisuch hamayim, ve'echad nisuch hayayim. So we'll say, Rabbi Nosson, interestingly enough, has a similar type of drasha to Rabbi Akiva, right? Rabbi Akiva darshans unisacheha on day 6 to talk about 2 libations. Rabbi Nosson also says there are 2 libations. He just learns that from a different source. His source is Haseich Nesach. Teaches me 2 libations, 1 of wine and 1 of water. I says the Gemara, Ema tarvayu dechamra. Maybe both libations are of wine. Im kein lichtov kra. O haseich, o nesach. If that's the case, then what Rabbi say? If the 2 libations are the same, then what? Write the same word twice. Right? In other words, write the same word twice. Why are you using 2 different words for libations? My haseich nesach, shamas mina, chad demayo, v'chad dechamra. The fact that Rabbi say that the Torah speaks out libations twice, haseich nesach, and uses 2 different words for those libations indicates to us what? 2 different libations. 1 of wine and 1 of water. Elahadisnan. But we'll say, what about, so we'll say, here's what I want to point out over here. You see, there's an underlying piece. If you remember again, in Maseches Sukkah, we made reference to this idea, namely, that there was a machlokes, and we'll see the Rambam, there's machlokes about which days on Sukkot did you perform Nisuch HaMayim? Right? Which days? Because remember, I'm going to say this is really in general. It's quite fascinating to see the things that the Torah spells out explicitly, and the things that are only known really ayidei remiza. And Nisuch HaMayim is such a perfect idea. Nisuch HaMayim is such a pivotal service. Because really it's the major avoda that focuses on the fact that Sukkot is the beginning of the rainy season, and we need rain. And yet it's amazing to see that it is not explicit in the Torah. Right? It's, again, everybody's agreeing we do it, but it's not explicit. It's learned out through Remes. And the other piece that I don't know is, when do we do it? When do we do it? So we'll say, watch this. This is incredible. Disnan. So he was Elahad Disnan, that which we learned, Nis Chamayim Kol Zayin. So let's listen to this. So the Gemara over here quotes from the Mishnah that says, Nis Chamayim, we do all 7 days. All 7 days. So whose opinion is that? So watch this. Money. I Rabbi Yoshua, Neima Chad Yoma. So we'll say, if it's Rabbi Yoshua, so we'll say now again, who's Rabbi Yoshua? The assumption is this is Rabbi Yoshua in the Mishnah. Right? Rabbi Yoshua in the Mishnah says, here's what the Gemara is going to do. The Gemara is going to assume that whenever you're starting Mashif Haruach HaMorid HaGeshem is when you would hold that there would be Nisuch HaMayim, which makes sense. Because essentially, Nisuch HaMayim, Mashif Haruach HaGeshem, is the beginning of what we'll call the rain service. So remember, back to Mishnah. According to Rabbi Yeshua, when did he begin Mashiach HaMorid HaGeshem? When? Shmini Atzeres. So here I have a Mishnah that says we do Nisuch HaMayim all 7 days. Whose opinion is that? If it's Rabbi Yeshua, Neimachad Yoma. If it's Rabbi Yeshua, the truth is I'm only going to do Nisuch HaMayim, maybe not even on Sukkot, which sounds strange, but maybe not even on Sukkot, maybe only on Shmini Atzeres. Rabbi Akiva, and if it's Rabbi Akiva, when does Rabbi Akiva say that you begin to say Mashiach HaMorid HaGeshem? When? Day 6. So maybe you'll do Nisuch HaMayim then on days 6 and 7. Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira, if it's Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira, when does he say you begin Mashiach HaMorid HaGeshem? When? Day 2. Shisa Yomi. Then at most you'll go ahead and you'll do Nisuch HaMayim 6 days. Bet Rabbi said the Mishnah says you do Nisuch HaMayim for 7 days. So what's going on over here? To which the Gemara says, you're right. The Olam, Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira. In reality, it's Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira. But one second, Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira said, you begin Mashiach Haruach HaMorid HaGeshem when? On day number 2. So how do you get 7 days? So the Gemara says, Usvira like Rabbi Yehuda demas nisin. And ultimately, again, he holds like Rabbi Yehuda in the Mishnah. Disnan, Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Bilug Haya Menasech Kol Shmona. Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira said that what? They used to have a pitcher, right? 1 lug, that they would use for Nisuch HaMayim all 8 days. All 8 days. But in Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira's model, what does he do? Mafik Rishon Uma'ayel Shmini. He just excludes the first day of Sukkot, but adds in the 8th day, i.e. Shmini Atzeres. Umayshno Rishon Delo. But why would Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira not have Nisuch HaMayim on the first day? The Gemara says, Chi Remizi Mayim B'Sheni Hu Remizi. Because at the end of the day, Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira says, Rabbosai, remember again, if you go with the Mayim imagery, so ultimately again, when does the allusion to Nisuch HaMayim begin? When? On day number 2. On day number 2, Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira will take out day number 1 because there is no allusion to Mayim, and to add in day number 2, which is the beginning. The Gemara says, Shmini Nami Remizi Mayim. I'm sorry, the Remizi Mayim B'Sheni Hud Remizi. Shmini Nami Ki Remizi Mayim B'Shvi'i Hud Remizi. But if that's the case, how do you include day number 8? Because remember again, if you go with Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira model, right, of the scriptural allusion to Mayim, the Mem, Yud, Mem, what days is it mentioned? 2, 6, 7, right? V'niskehem u'nisacheha kimishpatam. 2, 6, 7. So Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira, where do you get day number 8? There's no scriptural allusion to water on day number 8. To which the Gemara says, Ki Remizi Mai B'Shin Remizi. Ella, you're right. Shabbosai, so okay, we're back to square one. So remember, here's what we're trying to do. It's interesting that we're trying to reconcile everything over here, because the Mishnah says, Nisuch HaMayim occurs all 7 days. We are assuming that somehow your shita of Mashif Haruach Omori Dageshem should be reflecting in how you feel about Nisuch HaMayim. So what we're running up against over here is the fact that we can't seem to align any of the Mashif Haruach Umorid Hageshem positions with Nisuch HaMayim. To which the Gemara says, you're right, Ella Rabbi Yoshua he. Rather, again, it's Rabbi Yoshua. Now remember again, what did Rabbi Yoshua say? Rabbi Yoshua said that we begin to say, well, at least we assume right now that the Rabbi Yoshua we're referring to is Rabbi Yoshua in the Mishnah. What did Rabbi Yoshua in the Mishnah say? When did he begin to say Mashiach Mer Geshem? Shmini Atzeres. So watch this. So the Gemara says, Ella Rabbi Yoshua he v'nisuch hamayim kol shiva hilchasa gemirila. Rather, Rabbi say what you have to say is that again it's reflective of Rabbi Yoshua, and at the end of the day, Mashif Haruach Umorid Hageshem and Nisuch HaMayim are not related. They're not related. In fact, Nisuch HaMayim, Rabbi say, is a halacha l'Moshe Misinai. And again, what's the halacha? V'nisuch HaMayim kol shiva hilchasa gemirila. Ultimately, again, it is a halacha l'Moshe Misinai. If you take a look at Rashi says, El Rabbi Yoshua, it's right across. El Rabbi Yoshua, the Amr Mishas Hanachaso, Maskir v'afa pikein, Savar d'nisuch HaMayim kol shiva, the Gemara Gamirla, halacha l'Moshe Misinai, the Nisuch HaMayim kol shiva. So ultimately, again, we'll say, what a Musar Haskell. Sometimes we try to align different things, right? We try to make sense. Everything should fit into a comprehensive pattern, comprehensive picture. And sometimes life doesn't work that way. Life is filled with disparate pieces, right? Life is filled with puzzle pieces that do not fit into a greater picture. They just are what they are. They are what they are. We'll say, sometimes we do this with people also, that sometimes a person does something and we try to figure out how to reconcile that behavior with who I know this person to be. Right? My sin b'chol yom. And the truth is, sometimes you can't, because sometimes we have different parts of our persona that don't reconcile. Again, all of us have that. I do a lot of good things, and I do a lot of bad things also. And yet how could someone who does so much good also do so much bad? Not everything reconciles in life, right? The balance sheet doesn't always reconcile, right? In accounting it works, at least creative accounting it works, right? But lamaisa in life it doesn't always work. So isn't this incredible? We spent all of this time trying to figure out how can you reconcile Mashiv Haruach Umorid Hageshem with Nisuch HaMayim, right? And the answer is you can't. You can't, and you don't have to. I was saying human relationships, sometimes again when good people do bad things and we can't figure out how to reconcile it, sometimes we can't reconcile it. We all have contradictory pieces in our persona and contradictory pieces in our lives, and often they cannot truly be reconciled. Shabbos says, now watch this. We're going to end this sugya with the following. And the halacha of Nisach Hamayim is a halacha l'Moshe Misinai. Also, you've seen this Gemara so many times. Damar Rabbi Ami Am Rabbi Yochanan Mishun Rabbi Nechunya Ish Bigas Beis Charson Esther Netius Arava V'Nisoch Hamayim Halacha LeMoshe Misinai. I will say these items are always grouped together. The halacha of Esther Netios, Rashi says over here, Esther Netios Hamifurozos Besoch Beis Sa'ah Charshin Kol Beis Sa'ah Erev Shvius Ad Rosh Hashanah. So we'll say the halacha is if you have 10 saplings within an area of a base sa'ah, you are permitted to go ahead and plow them up until Rosh Hashanah. Up until Rosh Hashanah. Even though Rabbi say the halacha is by Shemitah, afagav deshar sados in charshin lifnei shvius lamid yom, even though normally you have to stop all agricultural work effectively Rosh Chodesh Elul, but yet if you have 10 saplings in an area of base sa'ah, you're permitted to go ahead and take care of them up until Rosh Hashanah. Why? Because we'll say, apparently, again, if you have this concentration of saplings within this particular area, if you do not take care of them until Rosh Hashanah, you will suffer an irreversible loss. And therefore, again, since the 30 days before Rosh Hashanah is a rabbinic add-on, the rabbis relaxed that rule in a case of hefsid merubah, in a case of dramatic loss. So this halacha of Esther Netios, this halacha, I should say that, actually, really, that's wrong. It's midorais already from Elul. But again, the halacha l'Moshe Misinai tells you that if there's a hefsid merubah, you could farm up until Erev Rosh Hashanah, or up until Rosh Hashanah. Arava, the halacha that we go ahead and we circle the mizbeach with an arava, and Nisach Hamayim. And the fact that we do Nisach Hamayim all 7 days, all of these things are halacha l'Moshe Misinai. I will say, and by the way, that is how the Rambam paskins. The Rambam paskins in Hilchos Tamidin, he paskins as follows. This is Perek Yud Halacha Vav. Kol Shiva Simei Achag Menaskin Es Hamayim Al Gabei HaMizbeach. All 7 days of Sukkot, we pour water on the Mizbeach, Nisach Hamayim, and listen what the Rambam says. The Davar Ze Halacha LeMoshe Misinai. And this is a halacha Moshe Misinai. V'im nisu chayayin shel Talmud shel Shachar v'nasei chamayim levado. Good. The Rambam says it's just they would do this in the morning with the Talmud shel Shachar. And I will say, I want to point out the fact that it is a nisa chamayim does not negate Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira's drasha. So the mayim drasha, right? Kim niskehem v'nisacheha kimishpatam mem yud mem from days 2, 6, and 7. That drasha is a good drasha, right? That's the remez. That's where we see a scriptural allusion to it. But Lamaisa, how do I know Nisach Hamayim? And how do I know Nisach Hamayim occurs all 7 days? That is a halacha l'Moshe Misinai. So what we've seen now from this sugya, because we're going to begin the next part of the Mishnah, or the next part of the Brisa, what we've seen now from this sugya is our multi-opinion machlokes as to the start of Mashiv Aruch or Morid HaGeshem, right? So we've got everything in the Mishnah from day 1, day 8, day 2, day 6. Okay, and we'll go out with a couple of Rebbe, also a couple of other opinions in this as well. Again, we'll see the halacha l'maisa with this in just a bit. Says the Gemara. Let's go weiter. Says the Gemara. Good. Rabbi Huda Omer Rabbi Yoshua over the thing ativ b'yom tov Aharon shel Chag Aharon maskir harishon eino maskir. So let's remember again. This is the end of the Mishnah. So Rabbi Huda said in the name of Rabbi Yoshua. Actually, I take that back. This is actually not quoting. This is not quoting the Gemara Mishnah. This is quoting the Brisa. Right. So let's remember again on Beis Mud Beis we quoted a Brisa that was very similar to our Mishnah. This is a quotation from the Brisa. Rabbi Huda Omer Mishum Rabbi Yoshua. Because let's remember again, Rabbi Huda in our Mishnah did not quote Rabbi Yoshua. We surmised that he was commenting on Rabbi Yoshua, but he did not quote him explicitly. So watch this. Rabbi Huda Omer Mishum Rabbi Yoshua. Rabbi Huda said in the name of Rabbi Yoshua, so the one who davens on Shmini Atzeres, Ha'achron Maskir, the Baal Musaf on Shmini Atzeres says, Mashiv Haruach Umorid HaGeshem, Harishon Eno Maskir. But the Baal Shachris does not. So both said this is very important. So going in the sheet of Rabbi Yoshua, that we don't begin to say Mashiv Haruach Umorid HaGeshem until Shmini Atzeres, 8th day, Who says it? Who says it on the 8th day? So ultimately, again, the Baal Musaf says it. We begin to say the Musaf, but we do not say it in Shachris. The bookend to that, so the Gemara says, when do we stop saying Mashiach Baruch Omer Geshem? On Pesach. On Pesach. And how does that happen? Harishon Maskir, ultimately again the Baal Shachris will say Mashiach Baruch Omer Geshem, Aharon Eino Maskir. But the Baal Musaf does not. So let's analyze this. Hey Rabbi Yoshua. So we'll say in the Brisa, when Rabbi Huda is quoting Rabbi Yoshua, which Rabbi Yoshua is he quoting? So Ilim Rabbi Yoshua de Masnisin. If you want to say it's Rabbi Yoshua of our Mishnah, watch this. Ha'amar biyom tava acharon shalchagu maskir. So we'll say Rabbi Yoshua in our Mishnah said, you begin to say Mashiach Baruch Umar Geshem when? By Shmini Atzeres. Now we'll say, I want to point something out. See, when Rabbi Yoshua says, you begin to say Mashiach Baruch Umar Geshem by Shmini Atzeres. We'll say, the automatic assumption is when on Shmini Atzeres should you begin it? When? Shachris. Now you could kind of Ma'ariv. We'll see why Ma'ariv is not really an option. But Shachris. In other words, when Rabbi Yoshua says that you begin to say Mashiach Haruach Umorid Geshem on Shmini Atzeres on the 8th day, he doesn't qualify it. Without qualification, the assumption is Shachris. So it can't be that Rabbi Huda is quoting Rabbi Yoshua in our Mishnah, because Rabbi Huda is saying, when do you begin to say Mashiach Haruach Umorid Geshem on Shmini Atzeres? When? By Musaf. But yet Rabbi Yeshua in our Mishnah would say by Shachris. So the Gemara says, Ella, Rabbi Yeshua de Braisa. Rather, it has to be Rabbi Yeshua of the Braisa, because what did Rabbi Yeshua of the Braisa say? The Amar Mishas Hanachaso. Because he said ultimately, again, from the time that you put down the lulav. Now take a look at Rashi, we'll say. Rashi says over here, so if you look, first of all, Rabbi Yeshua, it's in the intermediate lines of Rashi's second line in. Rabbi Yeshua, Ilin Rabbi Yeshua de Masnisin, Miyam Tava Aharon hu maskir, Derishon Nami Mispalot Tfilas Yotzer, Maskir, Ve'ilu Hacha, Tani Rishon Ina Maskir. Rabbi Yeshua the Mishnah, Bepashtos would be saying Mashiach Omer Geshem, even by Shachris. So it must be Rabbi Yeshua of the Braisa, who says Har Mishas Chanacha. So Dahainu b'Shvi'i v'Hachi Katani Yom Tov Acharon Shachag Dahainu b'Shmini. So we'll say, so it must be that it's Rabbi Yoshua of the Braisa who says that when do you begin to say Mashiach Baruch Omer Geshem from the time you put down the lulav, which is the end of the 7th day, which means from the beginning of the 8th day. You'll begin to say, the Gemara says, Rabbi Yeshua the Braisa, Rabbi Huda Omer, Mishun ben Beseira. Rabbi Huda said, in the name of ben Beseira, over the Tnei Teva B'Yom Tov Aharon Shalchag, Ha'acharon Maskir. But another version of this. Rabbi Huda said, in the name of ben Beseira, the person who davens Musaf, right, on Shmini Atzeres, he'll say, Mashiach Baruch Omer Geshem. So the Gemara says, hey ben Beseira. So who is this ben Beseira? Ilim Rabbi Huda ben Beseira. If you want to say Rabbi Huda ben Beseira, that can't be. We just said Rabbi Huda ben Beseira. According to Rabbi Huda ben Beseira, when do you begin to say Mashiach Baruch Omer Geshem? When? Right? Day two. So the Gemara says, B'chashenim b'chag u'maskir. So Amrav Nachman bar Yitzchak tehei Rabbi Yoshua ben Beseira. Oh, it must be Rabbi Osai that Rabbi Huda is quoting Rabbi Yoshua ben Beseira. Rabbi Yoshua ben Beseira. Zimnin, the Karilei Bishmei, sometimes he's called by his name, Rabbi Yoshua, and ultimately Vizimrin, the Kari Bishmei Da'aba. And sometimes he's just known by his father's name, Ben Beseira. So therefore, I will say, in the Brisa Amud Beis, when Rabbi Huda quotes Rabbi Yoshua, that's Rabbi Yoshua ben Beseira. When we just quote over here in the name of Ben Beseira, it's the same person, Rabbi Yoshua ben Beseira. Sometimes he's known by his name, sometimes he's known by his father's name. Which is which? But this is so profound. Before he got smicha, he was known by his father's name, Ben Beseira. After he got smicha, he was known by his own name, Rabbi Yoshua, which I will say is such a profound yesod in general, that in life, we often begin, right, with the identity of belonging to someone else, right? The first identity we have in this world is I am the child of someone, right? That's the first piece of identity we have. And that's a profound piece of identity. The goal in life is then to develop your own identity. There's a beautiful idea by the Belzer Rebbe. The Belzer Rebbe Zechasadev Kalish Levracha says in the pasuk in Az Yashir, Ze kehilla va'anvehu, Elokei avi va'aromemenu. Right? This is my God, and I will exalt him. Elokei avi, the God of my father, and I will praise him. So the Belzer Rebbe says, in life, you begin with Elokei avi va'aromemenu. Right? In my life, first I begin with the God of my father. Right? My father, hopefully my parents, introduced me to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But interestingly enough, they introduced me to HaKadosh Baruch Hu through their prism of understanding. Right? At first I grew up with the God of my parents, which is so incredibly profound to grow up with Elokei Avi, the God of my father. But what's my job? To then create for myself Ze kehilla, my God. I begin my journey in Yiddishkeit with the God of my parents, with the God of my Masorah, with the God of my family, with my parents' flavor of Yiddishkeit, but then it is my job to create my own unique relationship with the Ribono Shel Olam. Ze kehilla va'anvehu. I have to create my own unique relationship with Hashem as well. So it's incredible. So Rabbi, right? So he begins as Ben Beseira because he's his father's son. That's Elokei Avi va'aromemenu. Beautiful. But then ultimately, again, after he gets smicha, he forges his own derech. He creates his own unique relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's Ze kehilla. Then he becomes ultimately Rabbi Yoshua. Such an incredible yisod. So the Gemara goes weiter. Tana. So we'll say, so again, we're going to see the halacha l'maisa. I want to show you the Shulchan Aruch. Obviously, when do we begin to recite Mashiach Baruch Amar Ageshem? So okay, it's a little anticlimactic. You already know. We begin Shmini Atzeres. But again, we will see Meretz Hashem. Well, let me just say this very quickly outside. Okay. No. Fine. So we'll say, no, we're going to do it afterwards. We're going to do that. So let's go weiter. Tana betal beruchos l'chai. We have to get through the daf first. So Tana betal beruchos l'chai v'cham lahaskir. So I'll say, see, interestingly enough, again, what I will just tell you, just for now, then we'll see the halacha inside. Obviously, we paskin like Rabbi Yoshua, and halacha l'maisa we begin on the Shmini Atzeres. However, we do paskin, I should say a little bit differently. We paskin like Rabbi Yehuda. Right? That's really who we paskin like. We begin on Shmini Atzeres, but we begin ultimately again the Musaf. The reason, we'll see it inside, but the reason halacha l'maisa the Shulchan Aruch says that we do not begin by Ma'ariv is actually fascinating. Some things don't change. Why don't we begin Ma'ariv on Shmini Atzeres? Right? A lot of people aren't in shul. Isn't that incredible, right? Some things don't change. A lot of people aren't in shul for Ma'ariv, and therefore we can't begin in Ma'ariv. Why not begin by Shachris? Because remember, you're not supposed to interrupt between Gaal Yisrael and Shmona Esrei. So because of that, I will say, remember again, an announcement has to be made to the kehilla to begin to incite Mashiach Baruch Amar Geshem. So really the first time that an announcement can be made appropriately about the insertion of Mashiach Baruch Amar Geshem is when? By Musaf. And that's like in Abasa, you'll notice that the Gabbai makes an announcement before Musaf of Shmini Atzeres to begin to insert Mashiach Baruch Morid Ageshem. If that announcement is not made, let's say the Gabbai fell asleep, right? The Gabbai didn't show up, right? He didn't say it. You do not insert Mashiach Baruch Morid Ageshem without an announcement. Now again, we'll discuss. I want to give proper kovet to that piece. We'll do it inside. But you should just know that is the halacha l'maisa. You pass like Rabbi Yehuda. Again, the mechanics we'll get to. Tana b'tala beruchos lo chai v'cham lahaskir. We'll say fascinating Gemara. That when it comes to tal, when it comes to dew, and when it comes to wind, there is no obligation to make mention of them in Shmona Esrei. Ve'im bala haskir, if you want to, you can. So why is there an obligation to make mention? Or we'll say, by the way, this is why you'll notice. Isn't it fascinating? Some people say Morid Tal, some people don't. Right? Minhag Eretz Yisrael, Nusach Sfard, right? But Ashkenaz, Nusach Ashkenaz doesn't have Morid Tal. Why not? Because there is no obligation to make mention of tal, of dew. There is also no obligation to make mention of wind, even though wind is necessary as well. My timer, what's the reason? Rabbi Chanina, lefi she'ein ne'etzarin. Ultimately, again, because it is never withheld. Dew, I mentioned this yesterday, dew is never withheld, the winds are never withheld, and therefore there is no obligation to go ahead and make mention of it. So the Gemara says, B'tal, If you take a look at Rashi, by the way, Rashi says, Batala Baruchos, 3 lines over the bottom, Mashi Baruch Amori Datal, Lo Chayvu Chacham Lahaske Afilu Bimosa Gishamim, Lefi She'inon Ne'etzarin. Rashi says they're never withheld. Why? She'el Male Hein Ein Olam Miskayomin. Because at the end of the day, the world cannot exist without dew and without wind. So therefore, because they are absolutely an indispensable necessity for the existence of the world, they are never withheld. So the Gemara says, tell me, how do we know that dew is never withheld? So remember, this is the episode of Eliyahu Hanavi where he's confronting Achav, right, who was the evil Melech Yisrael, and he says, Chaya Hashem Elokei Yisrael, Asher Amarti Lefanav, Im Yashanu Ha'ila Tal Umater Kiyim Lefi Devari. So Eliyahu comes before Achav, incensed at the rituals of Achav, and he tells Achav, I swear, there will not be any tal, dew, or rain until I say so. Say, by the way, this reference is back to yesterday's daf. The Gemara says that the key of rain was never given over to anyone except only HaKadosh Baruch Hu holds it. This is where Tosas comes in. HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives it to people. But what? Yeah. Not in perpetuity. Takes it back. This is the story. Eliyahu Hanavi had the key to rain. So he was able to say to Achav, it will not rain. And he says, it will not do until I say so. Uksiv, and the pasuk says, Leich hera al Achav, ve'etna mater al pnei ha'adama. Yet HaKadosh Baruch Hu says to Eliyahu Hanavi, go and appear to Achav, and I will bring rain upon the earth. Interestingly enough, ve'ilu tal lo ka'amar. Yet HaKadosh Baruch Hu doesn't say, I'm going to bring dew. Right? He says to Eliyahu, go. Remember, Eliyahu says, I'm going to withhold the dew and the rain. HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, go, tell Eliyahu, go back to Achav, and tell Achav, I'm going to bring the rain. But yet it doesn't make any mention of the dew. My time, what's the reason? Amadeis mishum delo me'atzar. Because at the end of the day, interestingly enough, the dew was never actually withheld. In other words, even though Eliyahu said, there's going to be no dew, no rain, the rain was withheld, but the dew was never actually withheld. But if the dew was never withheld, ultimately, again, Eliyahu swore, right? He made a shvuah that there's going to be no dew and no rain until I say so. But if it was only the rain that was withheld, not the dew, so how is Eliyahu able to make this shvuah? Sahachi kamarle, this is what he meant to say. Afilu tal de bracha nami lo asi. So I'll say, as we're going to see, there's different forms of dew. There's tal shel bracha. Tal shel bracha actually has the ability to go ahead and cause things to grow. And then there's regular tal. And regular tal is just the basic moisture necessary to ensure the sustainability or the existence of the world. When Eliyahu Hanavi said, I'm going to hold back the tal, he said, I'm going to hold back the tal shel bracha. The basic, what we'll call sustenance tal, sustenance dew, that fell every single day. But the tal of bracha was withheld. If that's the case, so let Eliyahu Hanavi bring back the tal shel bracha, to which the Gemara says, Mishum delo minkra also. No, because people can't really tell the difference between tal shel bracha and regular tal, and therefore if Eliyahu Hanavi were to say, I'm going to bring back the tal shel bracha, ultimately, again, Achav would have made fun of him, right? Would have disparaged him, saying, come on, you never withheld the tal to begin with. Rashi says over here, Telo minkara milsa, the tal hava meikara, v'lo haya Achav harasha mode v'chazira the tal shel bracha. So the idea over here is, remember, the whole point of this was to punish and ultimately, hopefully, try to get Achav to do tshuva. But it only works if Achav was able to see it. But because he was not able to see, because dew still fell, and most people can't tell the difference between tal shel bracha and regular tal, there was no point in saying, I'm bringing back the tal. Because from Achav's perspective, the tal never left. Incredible. So the Gemara says, Ruchos minan v'lo me'atzar. So Rabbi said, that's how we see dew is never withheld. And therefore, because tal is never withheld, therefore there is no need to include tal or a request for tal in our Shmoneh Esrei, in our brachas. Ella, Ruchos minan v'lo me'atzar. How do you know that wind is never withheld? Amr Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, this is so beautiful. The Amr Ki ka'arba ruchos hashamayim. The Gemara quotes the pasuk from Zechariah. Ki ka'arba ruchos hashamayim pirasti eschem nu'um Hashem. So we'll say what this literally translates is like the four winds of the heavens. Pirasti eschem nu'um Hashem. I have scattered you. I have scattered you. So the Gemara says, my ka'amalu. So what is HaKadosh Baruch Hu saying? Ilema haki ka'amalu HaKadosh Baruch Hu Yisrael. If HaKadosh Baruch Hu is saying to us, that I scattered you, like I translated, that I scattered you in the four corners of the world, or like the four winds of the world, the four directions. Ihachi ke'arba be'arba mibayle. If the point of this pasuk was HaKadosh Baruch Hu telling us that I'm going to scatter you in the four directions, it should have said ki be'arba ruchos hashmayim perasti eschem. I have scattered you in the four directions. What does it mean? Right? So what does it mean? Ke'arba. But it's beautiful. Just like the world cannot exist without wind, the world cannot exist without Klal Yisrael. So the title of the pasuk is Ki ka'arba ruchos hashmayim perasti eschem. Is HaKadosh Baruch Hu saying to Klal Yisrael, even if you're punished, and even if you're scattered, know that you will never cease to exist. Why? Because there is no world without a Klal Yisrael. Because just like there's no world without the four winds, there is no world without a Klal Yisrael. But you see, Rabbi say that the pasuk is linking the eternality of Klal Yisrael with the eternality of the winds. So you need, just like the world can't exist without the winds, so too the world cannot exist without Klal Yisrael. So besides it being a beautiful lesson for Klal Yisrael, you see from here that what? That winds are never taken away from the world. So therefore, because they're never taken away, ultimately we don't have to include them in Tefillah. So Shabbos is such an incredible yesod. Because what the Gemara is highlighting is the only thing that's really included in davening are the things which there's a factor of variability. In other words, will it happen? Will it not happen? Rain could be withheld, but therefore we daven for it. But the things that are never withheld, Chazal felt do not have to make an obligatory appearance in davening. Rabbi Henoch. Therefore, based on what we just learned, so here's what I have. Rain, I have to mention. I'm mentioning rain again. Halacha l'maisa mashivarach amar Geshem Shmini Atzeres through Pesach. No obligation to mention Tal. No obligation to mention Ruach. Therefore, Rabbi Henoch, Hilchach b'mosachama. If during the summertime Amar Mashiv HaRuach Ein Machzirin Oso. Therefore, both say during the summertime. Now remember, during the summertime, Anasi Mashiv Ruach Amar Geshem. But let's say I said just Mashiv HaRuach. I made a mistake. I said Mashiv HaRuach. Do I have to repeat Shemona Esrei? And the answer is no. Why not? Because the truth is, it's an innocuous statement. Mashiv HaRuach. Yes. HaKadosh Baruch Hu always brings the wind, and the winds of some sort are always necessary. However, Amar Morid Geshem Machzirin Oso. But I will say during the summer months, meaning between Pesach and Sukkot, you say Morid Geshem, you have to go back because that is an erroneous insertion. Remember again, as we saw in yesterday's daf, we don't want rain. We don't want rain after Sukkot. After Pesach. B'mos hageshamim, if during the winter, lo amar mashiva ruach in machzirin oso. Shabbos, listen to this. During the winter, let's say during this time of year, let's say you omitted mashiv haruach, you don't have to go back. Why? Because as we just said before, you don't have to really make mention of the wind in davening at all. However, morid hageshem machzirin, lo amar morid hageshem machzirin oso. But if you omitted morid hageshem, right, then ultimately again you do have to go back. Not only that, but not only that, but what? If a person said ma'avir haruach, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu causes the wind to blow, umafriach hatal, and ultimately in machzirin oso, you don't have to go back. Good. So the Gemara says Tana ba'av Shabbos. So therefore, again, what turns out is the only part that's an absolute necessity is going to be morid hageshem. So anything else you include or don't include, ultimately, again, will not require you to go back and Shemona Esrei. So Gemara says, Tana, ba'avim u'beruchos lo chadu chachamim lahaskir. Another thing you don't have to mention. You don't have to mention clouds. So you both say clouds. It's incredible what we take for granted. But clouds are a necessity as well. But you don't have to go ahead and mention clouds. So ba'avim u'beruchos lo chadu chachamim lahaskir. But if you want to mention clouds, you want to mention wind, you can mention it if you want. My taima, what's the reason for this? Mishum dolo ma'atzri, because neither clouds nor winds are ever withheld. Now both say, winds we just established, clouds, that's interesting. So the Gemara says, really, Vahatani, we learn, Vatan Rabbi Yosef, V'atzaras hashamayim v'lo yemat, V'atzaras hashamayim, so we'll say, Kriya Shema. When the Pasuk says, Chosh Baruch Hu says, I will withhold the heavens, or literally, I shouldn't say, I will cause the heavens to withhold. What does that mean? Min ha'avim o min ha'ruchos. That refers to the clouds and to the winds. Ata omer min ha'avim min ha'ruchos o ena ela min ha'matar. Now, how do you know it's referring to the cloud and the winds? Maybe it's referring to rain. No, rain is mentioned. Kishu omer v'lo yematar. When it says explicitly later on, there will not be rain. Hare matar amar. There it explicitly says rain. So what does it mean when it says Chosh Baruch Hu will withhold the heavens? Min ha'avim o min haruchos. That ultimately again refers to the clouds and the winds. Shabbos says, what's going on over here? Kash haruchos haruchos, kash av ma'avim. Shabbos says, it's a contradiction. Because what did we just say before? Right? We just said before that ultimately again, that Chosh Baruch Hu never withholds the clouds and the wind. And now yet based on the drasha of Yosef, the Atzaras Hashamayim refers to what? A withholding of the clouds and the winds. So what's happening over here? To which the Gemara says, so kasha ruchas ros kasha avma kasha. It's not a contradiction. It depends on the type of cloud. Avma lo kasha, ha becharfi, ha ba'afli. Both say different types of clouds. If you look at Rashi says over here, Rashi says, I'm sorry. Charfi and afli. I'm sorry. It's right across. That's right across. Charfi avim bechiros haboim lifnei matar enon atzuros. So we'll say, interestingly enough, the clouds that come before rain, I guess what we would call rain clouds, right? The clouds that come before rain, those are never withheld. That's what the Gemara calls charfi. Charfi literally means early. The early clouds. Haba afli. Rashi says, habaos meucharos la'achar hamatar tishnios la'matar. But the clouds that come after the rain, ultimately again, the clouds that come after the rain, those are sometimes withheld. So the Gemara says, ruchos haruchos lo kasha. Also, ruchos haruchos is not a contradiction. How so? Ha beruach mitzuya, ha beruach she'ena mitzuya. Both say a ruach mitzuya, which means a common everyday wind, that is never withheld. But a ruach she'ena mitzuya, stronger winds, sometimes those are withheld. Look at Rashi, she'ena mitzuya, tziv va'atzar, va'afilu hachi, lo chayvu lahaskir disagile b'mitzuya. So both say sometimes a ruach she'ena mitzuya, right, a heavier wind, is actually withheld. So the Gemara will say, you know what, we'll stop over here for today. We'll Emirat Hashem pick up with Ruach Mitzuya, Emirat Hashem tomorrow. Shidar Chabosai.